So the Olmecs are the only example that I know of a truly lost ancient civilization. We don't know what language the Olmecs spoke, we don't know what they called themselves, we don't really even know how they gathered so much wealth to begin with, how they became so powerful to erect these heads and build these giant pyramids and palaces and enormous cities. We don't know how they established their trade connections or how far their trade connections were. Clearly, they were reaching all the way out to Belize in the Valley of Mexico. There is so much about the Olmecs that we don't understand, and I would say that they're probably the premier example of what it looks like and feels like to study a lost civilization. And so today we're going to be going through the rarest and earliest photographs that I have ever found of the Olmec heads. So this photo right here is a particularly rare photo. You usually don't see them quite like this. What's interesting about some of these Olmec heads is that they were actually turned on their back and laying face up. Some were buried straight down, and we're not really sure what exactly that means. There were some heads at San Lorenzo that were found with the top of their head facing up, and some of them, they had fallen backwards and their face was facing up. But I don't believe that any Olmec heads have ever been found in any other orientation, like not slumped laying down on their side or laying face down or anything like that, where they had to lift them up to reveal the face. As far as I know, they're all just pushed into the ground, or they're laying backwards. Now that could be a natural process. We don't really quite know. Now, something that's interesting looking at this photograph is you can just imagine looking at this, how many monuments scattered throughout ancient Mexico and really Central America as a whole, because there are other cultures that came after the Olmecs who also built colossal heads. Never at the same scale, but nonetheless, you can imagine how many monuments like this are just buried and hidden throughout time, right? So what was interesting about Matthew Stirling, who is this primary Olmec explorer, he's like the preeminent Olmec explorer. Nobody ever came really close to him. Well, what's funny about explorers and treasure hunters, people looking for something, is that you have some people who spend their entire lives searching and never find anything, and you have one guy who finds everything. And Matthew Stirling was the guy who finds everything. And there's this funny story, whether it's true or not, where he's frustrated one day, and he was big about taking his shoes off and walking barefoot around the grounds. And as he's walking around, he stubs his toe on the top of an Olmec head after he hadn't found anything that day or that week. And it's kind of a funny story, may or may not be true. But most likely, even though we don't have the very first stories of how a lot of these heads were found, because usually it's locals walking around, they know what's around here, but you can just imagine the feeling that they would have had looking at this ancient face staring eternally out of the ground, just a massive head in the ground. It's just amazing, and striking that no other civilizations in ancient Mexico really did anything quite like this on this scale. Like I said, there were other cultures that tried to emulate and copy the Olmec heads, but nothing that really was as grand or epic as not only the Olmec heads, but all of the monuments that the Olmecs created, and the detail in them, and the hardness, that fine-grained basalt that they mined out of the quarried out of the Sierra de la Tuxtla volcanic belt and transported so far to their cities. Nobody for the next 3,000 plus years in the Mesoamerican world ever did anything at that scale. So one of the hardest parts about the kind of research that I do isn't actually just finding the information, it's remembering the important and fine details once I've found them. Between interviews, phone calls, research, travel, or even just random ideas that come up along the way, there's a lot of things that I think about that I want to be able to come back to easily later on. But that's not always easy to do, and so that's why I use the Plaud Note Pro. It's this ridiculously thin credit card sized device that I can use to capture conversations, record my phone calls, and remember all the small important details. And then I can actually use Ask Plaud to ask Plaud questions about the things that I've recorded. So instead of digging through an hour-long conversation trying to remember that one specific detail, I can just say, hey, what was that one thing that I said about jaguars? And then it'll pull that information up immediately. You can also press the Note Pro to highlight something important, so while you're talking, the Plaud knows, hey, this part actually matters. And it even has this magnetic pouch that you slide it in right there, and then boom, sticks right to your phone. So it's really slim, easy to keep on you. And then when you're recording phone calls, like I was yesterday, interviewing several people who claim that they've seen eastern cougars in the foothills of Appalachia, well, they're spilling out information. I'm not going to be able to take notes and remember every single detail, so I've got Plaud recording the conversation, and then I can go back and sort of pick through those fine details to really understand what's going on. This little device has saved me so much time. You just connect it to your phone and it works seamlessly. I was very impressed by how well this thing works. So for someone who's constantly doing research, gathering fine details and information, interviewing people, Plaud is just such a great tool for me. It's basically like a memory bank for everything that I need. So check out the Plaud Note Pro using the link below, and thank you so much to Plaud for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the show. So this guy right here, this is the very first megalithic ancient monument I ever saw in my entire life. Monument 1 at the site of La Venta. Now you can see he's straight down. And what's interesting is that it looks like the top of his head is the only thing that may have not been buried, which is where you can see those were-jaguar claw marks that we talk about so much. Now his name could have been something like 3 Ahau. Getting into that because there's these 3 claw marks, and he has the king emblem on his skull, which is one of the reasons that they think that these helmets perhaps indicate the fact that they are royalty or kings. Maybe they are king ball players because the ball game is so intricately tied into their cosmology, their mythology, I should say, the view of the formation of the Mesoamerican world. So maybe it's the king wanting to show that he's a great ball player, and he has his insignia right here with these 3 jaguar claws. And he's buried almost to the top of his head, and then his little insignia and the rest of his head is carved up. Now these look like graffiti marks, but it's not graffiti. You can't just deface basalt like this. It doesn't quite look like this. Those graffiti marks, if that's what they are, those claw marks, you can walk up to them, or you can walk up to so many other Olmec sites that have these claw marks, and they're all about the distance from each other of a human hand. Like, I've seen claw marks with 4 to 5 claw marks, and I can put my fingers in each of them and follow them down. So these are either claw marks of were-jaguar people, because it's about the size of your hand if your hand had claws like the were-jaguar would. Werewolf, were-jaguar, it's the same sort of idea. Or if it's trying to symbolize it, it's an actual jaguar. And an actual jaguar is probably, his paw is probably about the size of a human hand as well. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if the Olmecs, maybe when they found dead jaguars, or they killed a jaguar and they're inspecting it and looking at it, I wonder if they put their hands up to the paws and saw that the claws are about the same distance from each other as our 4 pointer fingers, and thought that for some reason these were like people that had transformed into a jaguar. This is a very common thing throughout the ancient world, like the whole ancient world. In Africa, they describe like man-eating lions. They say that they are men who have shape-shifted into a lion. In Asia, they talk about people shape-shifting into tigers. This is out in rural France. When those wolves were predating on people, they were talking about the wolves there were black magic witches that had cast spells on people and transformed themselves into man-eating wolves. Like, this shapeshifter thing is so predominant throughout native indigenous cultures throughout the entire world. And what was interesting is when I was in Belize recently, which is funny because Belize is one of the places that we know that the Olmecs first were encountering and working intimately as far as government and trade, this Mesoamerican economy with the Maya. And so they were definitely influencing the Maya. And that's where the Maya tried to start their very first kingdom at the site of Saros sometime around 150 BC. Sometime around 50 BC, the kingdom ends up falling and it doesn't work, but the kingdom does arise later on in Mesoamerica. It's one of those, or in the Maya world, that's one of those reasons that we call the Olmecs this mother culture, because they inspired so many other cultures. But what's interesting about the Maya of Belize is that they actually preserve this were-jaguar, and you can see the were-jaguar 1,000 years later in Maya iconography in Belize, where you don't see it in most other places in the Maya world. Anyway, I say all that to say that there's something going on in the Olmec realm where I believe there's enough evidence to say that there's some kind of feud between this obvious section of Olmec population that are these were-jaguar shamanistic people. There are so many more were-jaguars in the Olmec world than there are Olmec heads. There's only 17 Olmec heads. There's thousands of were-jaguars. And I think that there is this break in their society where these two, maybe the warring party and the shamanistic priesthood, are warring against each other. And I think it's possible that these Olmec heads, which are almost definitely rulers, these royal people, are feuding with the shamans, and it's resulting in possibly when a king dies, or maybe a king is overthrown and he's assassinated, he's killed, they push the head into the ground and then they carve it up. There are some of them where their faces are carved away, but most of the time it's the top of their head. It's like they purposely, no matter who it is, whether it's the were-jaguars or whether it's a culture later on, but I think it has to be the were-jaguars. It's funny, they have this cultural line that they don't cross. They will not deface the actual face, but they will deface the helmet and the insignia that's on it. So it's almost like when people are grave robbing in ancient Egypt and they don't have the audacity to defile the actual body of the pharaoh itself, but they will take all the grave goods, but they won't defile the body. It's like they have this there's this moral line that they won't cross. And I think something like that is happening in the Olmec world too. So here's another photo. This is the warrior. He's also at La Venta Monument 3. He's heavily eroded. This is a more like porous basalt. But also you can see just barely on the front of his head, but all over the top, he's all cut up. And they call him the warrior because he looks like he's been in battle. But in reality, I don't think that he was in battle. I think that he was either assassinated, toppled by the were-jaguars, and they bury his head and they mark up the head again. But again, the heads aren't graffiti where they're going and like just, taking a sword or something and cutting. I mean, they don't have swords, but taking something and just defacing it. The defacing is art, which is crazy. They took the time to make the claw marks the exact distances between each human finger. It's a style of were-jaguar art that's defacing the Olmec heads. Fascinating. So this is actually, there's not really a good numbering system, chronology between the Olmec heads, because the very first Olmec head that was ever discovered, this guy, was found at the city of Tres Zapotes, which makes him actually one of the youngest Olmec heads. Tres Zapotes is one of the last Olmec cultural centers. And so he was found just like he's depicted there on the left. They knew for a long time, from the 1850s and 60s, they knew that there was a head out there. Jose Maria Melgar y Serrano, who was a Spanish or a Mexican traveler, writer, adventurer, he was taken out there by the locals, kind of just like the guy you see there on the left, and they were basically showing him, look at this big head that's out here in the field. And so he wrote about it. And it was 70 years later or 80 years later before Matthew Stirling would come around to study the heads again, which if you see there on the right photo, They finally excavated it and cleared it, and that's Matthew Sterling on the right side, kneeling down and touching the head. But man, must have been just mind-blowing. So when they found these heads, the predominant culture that was being studied in academia was the Maya and the Aztecs. Now, Mayanists were hell-bent on the idea that the Maya were the origins of Mesoamerican civilization. I have a book by Sylvanus Morley, who's like the predominant Mayanist of the early 1900s. He was the mentor of Franz Blom. And this guy, really accomplished academic, but absolutely hated the idea that the Olmecs could be even more ancient than the Maya, and very strongly chastised not only Matthew Sterling, but his wife Marion Sterling, who was his right-hand woman and helped him in all of his field research. She was actually the one who completed the dates of Stela C, which was found at Tres Zapotes, that gives us a definitive date which goes back hundreds of years before the period of the classic Maya. Just absolutely fascinating. You can see on that on the Olmec head, he's got this is one of the ones where it's really obvious that he's got that ear spool going through his ear. It's like there's a bone or there's some kind of jade ornament going through his ear. Some of these Olmec heads, because they're carved out of basalt, they just preserve detail so well on a lot of them. If they're able to commission the fine grain, like highest quality basalt, it preserves a lot of detail. And some of the ones at San Lorenzo are like the best examples of this. There's some at La Venta that are really astonishing too, but San Lorenzo has some of the best ones. And what's funny is that not even, you would think like bigger is better, but actually some of the medium-sized heads are really the nicest ones. But it's very cool to see that. So like you can see his ear here. You can see this bone spool, or maybe it's jade or something going through it. But you can see a part of the helmet is coming down right here too, like where his sideburn would be. So it's really the helmet is coming over his head. And another thing that's interesting about these helmets is just like so many ancient clothes that we know exist, like the pharaoh's crown, the pharaoh's headdress in Egypt. We've never found any of those. We don't even know what they were made out of. We don't know how exactly they created them. They must have been finely, elegantly crafted. I mean, there are some full body statues of Olmec people that you can see at the city or at the Museum of La Venta, and it's just amazing the sheer detail. Not only the detail of the statues, but you can tell that these people have good taste in clothing aesthetics. They have swag. It's just crazy. So here's another one of these heads. This is a rarer head. He's almost never depicted. He kind of has a mean-looking face. That's Matthew Sterling on the left. He was excavated at San Lorenzo, and I believe that this head is on display at the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City. And you can see how porous that basalt really is. Like it looks like he has very, very bad acne. Definitely not the finest grain basalt, yet the detail is still amazing. Look at his headband going across. It's got 2 layers on it. It clearly has an emblem, an insignia right here. Look at the eyelids, the pupil, like the cornea. Look at the furrowed brow that's right here. The detail in that. Look at his teeth inside of his mouth. I mean, just amazing. And it's so obvious these are not were-jaguars. This is the people who are so wealthy that they're able to commission a monument like this to be made for them. And clearly it's a portrait of exactly what they looked like, probably at the prime of their life. They're so wealthy, yet they don't have anything monumentally to do with the were-jaguar cult that is obviously so predominant throughout the entire culture. How's that possible? It's interesting. I need to find out what watch Matthew Sterling has right there. That would be cool to know. I don't like that hat as much. I think he's got a straw hat because it's probably the summer. His other his white felt hat is a lot cooler. This is I think this is one of the heads at Tres Zapotes, but it may be one of the heads from San Lorenzo too. This is another one of the rarer heads. Look at the detail on the back of the helmet. Look at the detail on the front of the helmet. Look at the ear. Look at that little the part of the helmet that comes down where the sideburn is. Now, this time he doesn't have ear spools on. He has what's probably a little jade jewel with something hanging down underneath that. Look at the detail on the nose, the lips. You even have the ridge on the bottom of the lip and the chin with the furrowed brow. Just the detail is actually insane. Oh, I know what those are. That's a jaguar paw. That's a jaguar paw laying over his head. You see the nails on it? So on his helmet, he either had it was either artistic or maybe it was real. Maybe he really did have a jaguar paw with its claws coming down right here. It could have been something like this. That's fascinating. I tell you, just staring at these old photos, sometimes you get angles that you can't see in person. Like a lot of times when you're looking at this Olmec head in person, you can't see the top. You can't see the upper part of the head because it's either on a pedestal or they're just way tall. They're like, some of them are twice as tall as you are. But yeah, fascinating. Look how deeply that's buried there. If that's buried so deep, it was almost completely covered. Imagine how much more else is out there that will never be excavated. And that's Marion Sterling leaning down to the right. A whole movie needs to be made about Matthew and Marion Sterling. I don't know why there hasn't been one. And one of the coolest things about the Olmecs is, yes, Matthew and Marion Sterling and the Smithsonian were working with the Mexican government to achieve these things, but this was an American project that was achieved before and after World War II. It is such an it's a great American story. Two people against all odds discovered, I say two people, but they're obviously leading it. But against all odds, they discover a lost civilization, and under scrutiny for years and years and years, they have to prove that this lost civilization is actually more or less this mother culture of all civilization. They pull the rug out from all the preeminent archaeologists and historians in Mexico and the United States and completely rewrite history. It's fascinating. I mean, it's just an amazing, amazing story, and it's something that should be told. I mean, this is another sort of Lost City of Z story here. Whereas Percy Fawcett did find a lot of interesting things. He never found what he was looking for. Matthew and Marion Sterling found what they were looking for, and 10 times more. Now, this is another one of the heads. I believe this head comes from La Venta. Look, he's got the 3 were-jaguar claws on the top of his head too. But this time it's 3. So sometimes that 3 means something. It has something to do with his name. He's like 3 something. Sometimes it's 3 Ahau or the 3 King or the 3 Jaguar. We don't really know, especially because we've never deciphered Olmec language. It's more like symbolism or logograms, but we never officially deciphered them. But clearly all the insignia on the helmets, 1, they're all different, and 2, they all have to have meaning. But this is one of the most beautiful heads. I don't know if it's just the setting and it's the way that the trees stand around it, that it doesn't really get like direct sunlight, and because of that, the way it illuminates the head allows you to see so much detail, because sometimes if the sun is shining directly on one of the heads, it washes out all the detail. But if you're able to diffuse that light and it's just this little aura glow of the sunlight around the head, it really brings out all of the detail. And I believe that's how it is with this head at the at La Venta Park. But again, just amazing and colossal. Matthew Sterling to the right of the head. I think that's his white felt hat there, and you can see that he's wearing really tall leather boots there to avoid the fertile ant snakes that are all over this swampy region of Mexico. But amazing. Look at the teeth. Look how deep they carved into the head to open the mouth just a little bit to show the teeth coming out from inside the mouth. Crazy. Oh, I love this one. So there's this really iconic photo that's taken of the head. I believe it's head El Rey. It's like it's the largest head that was found at the city of San Lorenzo. And you always wonder, how the heck did they get so far up to be able to take this photo? So they made this makeshift giant tripod staircase and strapped the camera to it with some ropes and vines, and got way up above the head to be able to take a photo of it as it's in situ and where it's found. But look at how much they had to dig away to be able to get to the head, and look how massive it is. I just love this photo. You usually only get the perspective of where the camera on top of the tripod is taking the photo right now. You never get a perspective of someone standing off to the side taking a photo of the person that's taking a photo of the actual subject of the expedition. Amazing. So I love going through these early photographs. I feel like I always notice something new the more I sit here and stare at them. And yeah, I love doing this with you guys. So let me know in the comment section below what subject you'd like me to cover next, and I'll see you guys next time on Rare Photos.